I'm going to be talking about some of the history of the DOE laboratory system and the basic layout of the modern DOE laboratory contract. The audience for this video is new laboratory or DOE staff that have not worked in this system. The concept of a government-owned, contractor-operated laboratory originates with World War II when the government decided to pursue atomic weapons. The system then matured during the Cold War. Today, the problems are different, but the concept lives on. We still maintain the nuclear arsenal, but we also do basic science that requires large and expensive machines, like research into high-energy physics, or research that is too high risk with too long of a commercial payback period for the private sector to invest resources into, like batteries. Oftentimes, the real benefit of the laboratory is not that they can solve one problem, but that the range of resources available can solve many different types of problems. The concept of giving smart people money and letting them lead is still fundamental to the system today. Does the strategy still work today? You can find many opinions going either direction, but the DOE laboratory complex is still the envy of the world, with imitation from many other places, such as the Chinese Academy of Sciences or the many Korean research institutes. In fact, our laboratories are sought out by both domestic and foreign governments, as well as large and small businesses to solve their big and little problems that cannot be solved anywhere else. But the strategy is not perfect. The first contract at Argonne was only 10 pages long. The statement of work was a paragraph. Now, the contract stretched for thousands of pages, if including all of the work authorizations. Federal acquisition regulations are built around the more typical supply or service requirements, and fitting the laboratory contracts into that regulatory environment is a challenge. Is it the best of both worlds or the worst of both worlds? There are many benefits to piggybacking off of existing regulations. There is improved oversight and accountability since the mistakes have mostly already been made. Reporting is also consistent across the complex. Standard cost principles allow for more predictable decisions from the government on cost allowability, and despite all of the regulations, the contractors are much more maneuverable than they would be under any other type of federal contract. But if you ask the scientists what they would like to be doing, you will not hear too many say that managing the contract is their favorite part of their job. They would much rather be doing science. Accountability also swings both ways. If the government knows or should know about a problem, then Congress expects the government to eliminate or mitigate the problem. The result is the government manages more than the contractors may otherwise find useful. There is a pendulum created by these events, where sometimes the government has too little oversight, and sometimes there is too much. You may hear the saying, there is no reaction like an overreaction. The government does provide feedback to the contractors, at least annually through formal evaluations. However, what is most important often takes a backseat to what is most easily graded. Another challenge is many of the problems the laboratories are solving cannot be completed in a year, so the feedback is not based on results, but on progress, which may or may not lead to a successful completion. These problems create a situation where the contractors are forced to manage the government. A current management buzzword for this is contractor assurance systems, where the contractor must provide some assurance to the government that the contract is being managed appropriately. This can be done in business systems and project management, but is much harder to accomplish in the scientific arena. However, since the contractors cannot possibly anticipate all of the concerns the government may have, the contract includes many reporting requirements that the contractor must provide. Argonne is required to submit around 350 reports to DOE each year. There are 3 sections of federal regulations that are unique to the DOE laboratory contracts that everyone who works in this area should be familiar with. Thankfully, the 2 FAR sections are pretty short. The Federal Acquisition Regulation, or FAR, Part 17.6, is a section on management and operating contracts. It defines M&O contracts and provides instructions to DOE on what approvals are needed before DOE may award or renew these contracts. FAR Part 35.017 defines federally funded research and development centers and provides specific instructions on what kind of work can be performed at FFRDCs. It should be noted that not every M&O contract awarded by DOE is also an FFRDC. You should know what your contract is. The last section is the Department of Energy FAR Supplement section on M&O contracts. This is a long section with requirements that deviate from the FAR due to specific allowances Congress gave DOE for their laboratory contracts. This regulation is quite long, but you should at least skim the table of contents and read the sections that are relevant to your area of responsibility. I will be elaborating on the parts that relate to technology transfer in future videos. What do the contracts look like? Almost all of the contracts are on public-facing websites, and you can find them from a simple Google search. There are two main parts to the contract. The first consists of the Uniform Contract Format contract, which is organized like any other federal contract. The two sections of the UCF I would encourage you to read end to end are Section C, which is the Statement of Work, and Section H, which are clauses unique to that particular contract. These two sections will create the flavor for your laboratory. Section I then goes into specific requirements of the contract, which you may recognize from your research into DEAR 970 mentioned on the last slide. The second part consists of the orders that are referenced in an appendix to the contract in Section J. I will talk about these more in a minute. DOE also gives direction via letter, and those will not usually be visible in the contract. These are mostly directions to do specific work or instructions on how to satisfy requirements listed in the contract. They may also allow the contractor to deviate from some clauses. The orders, which may also be referred to as directives, provide instructions to both the contractor and to DOE on how to do certain things. These directives are updated periodically, and managing them is almost a full-time job. The DOE Field Office is responsible for notifying the contractors when an order is updated, and the contractor is given time to change their processes to accommodate the new requirements. DOE also has a system where interested parties are able to comment on draft orders before they are published. Any order with a contractor's requirement document which fits within the work done at the laboratory will be attached to the contract. The CRD is most relevant to the contractor, but the DOE staff responsible for compliance with that order should be familiar with the whole document. How important are the orders? Approximately 2/3 of the contract page count is in the orders. This is where most of the meat in the contracts is located, since they provide the most detailed instructions on how things should be processed. Contract administration is primarily a concern between DOE and the contractor parent, such as Battelle or the university operating the laboratory. The primary actions that occur for contract administration are the initial award and subsequent renewals every 5 years, along with updates to the contract terms, conditions, and statement of work. Clauses and orders are updated periodically, but this is not done consistently across the department. The contractors are only required to perform to the clauses and orders that are part of their contract. If DOE does not update clauses, the contractor should not update their processes. While most contracts are current to within 6 months, some may be 3 or more years out of date. I mentioned that the DOE evaluates the contractors at least annually. Within the Office of Science, this evaluation starts when DOE modifies a performance evaluation measurement plan into the contract as an appendix, usually in September or October, which describes what DOE will evaluate the contractor on during the next year. This concludes with the DOE assigning grades and awarding to the contractor fee and award term if justified by the performance. It may be useful for you to be familiar with how you fit into the evaluation of the contractor so that you may be prepared to either support the grades you assign or defend the actions of the contractor at the end of the year. Contract evaluations are primarily looking at big picture, systemic performance. Program offices or system managers will likely provide better and more meaningful feedback directly to their laboratory subject matter expert. DOE program offices should be providing feedback directly to their principal investigators. DOE field office subject matter experts should be providing feedback directly to their laboratory counterparts. And laboratory managers should be seeking feedback from their DOE counterparts. Managing expectations is responsibility of both the DOE and the contractor. The last topic I will discuss is how work is assigned to the laboratory. Usually, contracts are written so that the contractor performs in accordance with the statement of work. However, the M&O contracts contain open-ended statements of work that do not describe specific tasks that must be completed. This gap is filled in by Order 412.1, Work Authorizations, which describes the process by which DOE assigns work to the laboratory. Usually, the DOE will issue a call for fieldwork proposals to the laboratories. The laboratory will then prepare and submit a proposal to the DOE Program Office with a specific statement of work, complete with budget and any other information needed for evaluation. The DOE Program Office will then select which proposals they wish to fund and will issue work authorizations to the laboratory. The work authorizations are signed by the Program Office, a contracting officer, and laboratory management. Concurrently with those signatures, DOE places the funding onto an approved funding plan, or AFP, in the DOE's accounting system, which will include all of the funding to be placed onto the contract. The contracting officer then modifies the AFP onto the contract at least monthly. Work may begin once both the work authorization is signed by the contracting officer and the funding is modified onto the contract. Non-DOE work is different, and I will be creating additional videos to explain the process by which that work is authorized later. You can get a head start on those topics by reviewing the 2 clauses in the order listed on the screen. The immediate takeaway I want you to have is that DOE must authorize all work, even work that is not being performed for DOE. The reason for this stems back to the limitations placed on FFRDCs by FAR 35.017. All of the contracts also contain a clause which prohibits the contractors from performing work outside of their DOE contracts. Therefore, all work performed at the laboratories is subject to the DOE contract, and since DOE is responsible for that contract, DOE must control all work performed under the contract. The exception is when work is being performed under the original statement of work attached to the contract, such as work performed at user facilities or educational outreach activities like training. Since the work is fully defined up front, there is no need for DOE to approve the projects that fit within the previously approved scope. You should be able to find the user facilities at your site by looking in the statement of work of your contract. I hope you found this introduction to the DOE laboratory contracts interesting and useful. Please post any comments on corrections or clarifications that may be needed, and I'll do my best to address them. Since the DOE is so large, with so many different opinions on process, there are bound to be discrepancies between sites, and sharing those could be helpful to others watching this video in the future. Or you can send me an email at roguecontractingofficer@gmail.com. Listed are the other topics I plan on addressing while I'm on this unsupervised sabbatical. Please let me know if there's anything else you would like covered, and if I am comfortable with the topic, I'll do my best to post it. Cheers!